Georgia and Florida are going streaking. They are continuing their streak in Jacksonville at least until 2025. We weren't sure. We heard some rumors, heard some reports that it might leave the confines of TIAA Everbank Jacksonville Gator Bowl Stadium, but it's sticking around. So, guys, there was that news today, and then there's the news that Penn State and Michigan State will play in Detroit on Black Friday. A lot of people were mad about that one. Georgia fans, I think, were just kind of like, all right, whatever. And I think that when you have both of those matchups kind of, I guess, pitted against one another, when you look at the news today, I don't know that the fact that there was no buzz around the Georgia-Florida game is a good thing. I think it probably would have been better. We would have gotten a better indicator if people did react to it the way they did about Penn State and Michigan State. What do y'all think?
I didn't even know that the Penn State Michigan State thing had happened.
I didn't either.
Yeah, we were like neck deep in recruiting stuff and trying to get the Georgia news out. But man, I'm telling you, from what I've heard in the past 48 hours, I would not put a lot of. I would not start inviting my friends and family to future Georgia Florida home and home games. I wouldn't quite do that yet. Just saying. And today's news doesn't affect that really at all. I'm not sure they're going to be stadium renovations, period. I'm not sure when they're going to be if they are there. I think the renewal of this thing kind of pushes it past 2025. Wes, you and I had a phone conversation today where I kind of talked to you about some of the stuff I had heard. I think there's some politics being played with the renovations and the current mayor talking about the renovations right now. There's a lot going on there, man, and I don't necessarily think that ultimately that the University of Georgia. I know what Kirby wants. I don't know that Kirby wants it so bad that he's going to quite get it, though. We'll see. A lot can change.
Is that not the narrative, though, around Georgia fans? What Kirby wants, Kirby gets, and he wants this so bad. It's interesting to hear that you don't think he's that desperate about it. And when we read the breaking news from our guy, Claude Felton, a Georgia legend, great American.
News item in 5.
The subject of the email just said news.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was happening. And it was funny because it was right around the time that we were waiting on a commitment, or I think the commitment had just happened. So I was like, gosh, what else is about to happen?
Yeah.
It's just so anticlimactic. And I think that's really my takeaway about Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville is if there's any reason for it to move, maybe it's just time to change some things up. I don't know. That's just kind of my takeaway from today. It was just kind of, maybe it was all the recruiting news that made everything pale in comparison, and we've talked about it so many times. I promise we will talk about every commitment Georgia's picked up since we spoke last, which was Sunday, and 3 guys have committed to the Dogs since then, and Jake Roos will be in to talk to us about that. It was just it's kind of a ho-hum news update, and I feel like that used to be a bigger deal.
Yeah, Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, here's why I think it is because I don't really know that we should have expected anything different here. They were under an agreement through 2023. It felt like a no-brainer to extend that to 2024 and 2025 to buy them some time. I mean, with the uncertainty of when those renovations are happening, if those renovations are happening in Jacksonville, Georgia and Florida are both going to have to plan around that. That they've got to have some sort of an idea ahead of time, that they will be hosting a, rivalry game that they haven't hosted since 94, 95. So 30 years. I mean, to me, I think that all along I expected the extension to be used for 24 and 25, And then if this game was going to move out of Jacksonville, it would happen after that. When a new completely new contract was getting started. And so, this is just kind of a continuation of what was already agreed upon. They had clearly had a 2025 date out there that they had at least mentally, said, hey, we're going to, keep this game in Jacksonville through that time. But the extension doesn't say, well, there's another extension at the end of it for 26 and 27. It's not like they're doing 2-year deals. So at the end of this, they're going to have to come to a new agreement with Jacksonville, with each other, whoever that may be. And we're going to be in a new world of college football at that point. The SEC will have 2 new teams. The playoff will have 8 new teams. Georgia, Florida won't be on CBS anymore. It'll be on ESPN or ABC, or won't be being played at 3:30 in all likelihood. It'll be, a primetime game or a noon game or whatever. College football is going to look different. So I think that the 24-25 agreement just kind of made sense to keep things status quo as much as possible in a time of change. And it bought them some time to reassess things together.
Palmer, it really throws off our Taco Lou thing, our post-game Taco Lou. But I want to see this thing played at night. I want to see this thing played at 7:30. I want to go out.
I think we could hit Taco Lou for lunch, though.
Nah, we'd hit Taco Lou on Friday night. That's how that would work. We'd have to cut out 2 dudes.
That place rocks.
Yeah, we'd have to cut out 2 dudes seafood, but we'd hit Taco Lou.
We'd still hit the barbecue spot.
Yeah, maybe we hit 2 dudes for lunch on Saturday, but missed Bearded Pig at the alternated or something. But no, I mean I don't know, man. I still think Jacksonville's got some cards to play on this, and they double the money. It's going to be hard to turn it down. It's just, I mean, you sit there and listen, you go back and you read Kirby's quotes. Wes, I don't know if you've done this. I think you may have.
Yep.
You go back and you read Kirby's quotes, and he mentions the recruiting thing. He also mentions the money.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirby, from what I understand, he makes $10 million a year. Not a big spender of his own money, big spender of Georgia's money. Loves to spend Georgia's money.
Well, what did Georgia lead the country in? Lead the conference in?
Recruiting
spending
budget.
Money on recruiting. So
yeah. I think they also led the country in revenue as well.
I've got Kirby's quote for you if you want me to read it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just do story time with Palmer.
He said,
I wish I had some music.
There's really quality benefits to both. When it comes down to it, there's a very, very basic element of everything comes back to, number 1, money, and number 2, recruiting and getting good players. I firmly believe that we'll be able to sign better players by having it as a home and home because we'll have more opportunities to get them on campus. But I also think there's a financial factor that factors into that with the game being there and being able to make more money for the university possibly there. You have to weigh both of those and make a really good decision. And
I mean, we've
factors, baby. Factors.
I read that and I thought, man,
using the double factor, baby.
Factor square.
Palmer, you and I were talking before we hopped on here about the student perspective of this. If it ever did go to home and home, woo, that fall break and Georgia students not going down to St. Simon's.
It would be interesting because, and like we were saying, for those that don't necessarily know, the University of Georgia fall break falls on the Friday, just one day before the game every year. Students make the trek down to St. Simon's and enjoy the day on the beach. And then a lot of folks make the trip from St. Simon's to Jacksonville. A lot of Georgia fans stay in that St. Simon's area to, relive their glory days, and make that trek as well.
Georgia's glory days are never ending right now.
Jake,
the Braves must have scored a couple runs.
Little Obama over here, little Marcelo Ozuna bomb.
No, Bruce isn't on yet. Bruce isn't on yet for the O-bombs.
Yeah, no bomb.
No, but I mean, it would be interesting because as somebody that has been to Jacksonville, I've never been to Gainesville. I've driven through there and stopped at a gas
Where'd you
station
go?
or whatever.
A Flash Foods?
I don't even know what I stopped at. Just
What
some
town
sort
are
of
we
gas
talking about?
station at Gainesville.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean,
You're not missing much.
but
No,
I mean,
it's really not the best college town.
But I think it would. But I think it would be cool to experience a game.
Go hang out with all those ACRs down there, as Andy Staples calls them, Alachua County residents.
I think it would be cool to do something different.
Yeah.
And maybe that's somebody. I'm coming from a perspective of, I'm not from the state of Georgia. I didn't grow up in a household of Georgia fans. Really Georgia Florida is a relatively new rivalry to me.
We're throwing a pity party, okay? We're not going to feel sorry. We're not going to feel sorry for you because you didn't. I don't want all those awesome things.
I don't want you to feel sorry.
If there is a reason that Kirby does want to stay in Jacksonville, it's because the Dogs have been chomping some gator tail down there. 5-2 since Kirby took the job. One of those years was his first season on the job. One of them was COVID. Not making excuses. I'm just saying those were two pretty good years for Florida to catch Georgia.
It certainly makes it harder if you've got to go into the swamp every year. But on the flip side of things, I really do think it would be an incredible atmosphere to see, Florida come into Sanford Stadium, the not so intimidating, not top 5 in the SEC Sanford Stadium.
Yeah, I do want it to be played as a home and home at some point. I hope there's some stadium renovations if they do, decide to keep this game in Jacksonville. Because, listen, I don't like making the trip down. I flew down there last year, and Palmer and I were talking about it earlier today. I'm like, man, I'm thinking about going into my own pocket to do it again this year because it sucks.
You can't get out of there fast enough.
Yeah, like it sucks so bad. Like I flew out at like 6:45 a.m. last year. I mean, did I have a drink in the Delta Sky Club at 6:45 a.m.? You don't have to know.
If you're not going down there to watch Georgia beat Florida, if you're a Georgia fan, or play 72 holes of golf, it's not, I don't know. I would want to get out of there pretty quickly too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it. But I don't know. I mean, I think playing in Jacksonville, as things stand right now, I think playing in Jacksonville every year is advantageous to Georgia. If Georgia ever gets, if Georgia ever kind of slides back a little bit or this thing evens out, I think Florida ends up with a little bit of an advantage. But here's another thing you think about too. Georgia flies out of Athens. They fly in directly into Jacksonville. Florida bus is over. It's not that big of a deal. You end up with a lot of Georgia fans there. I think when Georgia's better, this thing's better for Georgia to be at a neutral site every year. But that's not always going to be the case. But it really does just come down to money, man. It's just going to come down to money because they make so much already. And then the city of Jacksonville, I want to say that the numbers were there's about $12 to $15 million worth of revenue, maybe more, that flows into Jacksonville for that entire weekend, right? Well, Jacksonville's paying each team $1.5 million right now. I think it goes up to $1.75 million next through the extension, maybe, or maybe it's 1.7. It's somewhere in there. The city of Jacksonville comes up with $4 million to pay to these teams, and then plus they split the gate, plus they, get the travel expenses. That's another thing too. Folks don't think about it. Georgia pays its own expenses to get down to Gainesville. They pay not a dime to get to Jacksonville. They get their expenses paid for. They get like a stipend that probably they go under and make a little more money on. And listen, it makes the world go round, and that's a big part of recruiting as well. So I mean, it may end up being a drop in the bucket. I don't know. I just know that I don't really care to go down there every year. I would love to just have like an every other year trip.
I can tell you this, though. I certainly don't want it go into, any sort of Jacksonville, Atlanta deal because I mean,
no, that's not natural. We don't need that.
And
I don't
feel
need
like,
to ever go into Atlanta again, personally. But
but
Atlanta and
Fred's eating
Jacksonville.
bread, Jake.
I mean, yeah, both franchises really strong candidates. Just move everything to London. I think that people would be all right with that.